My husband once labelled me financially useless. Right there in the divorce papers he left on my desk. He truly believed I was nothing more than a burden, incapable of contributing anything meaningful, while secretly having an affair with my secretary, the woman I had paid and trusted for years. What he didn't know was that I was days away from closing an $800,000 deal to sell the tech company I built from scratch. And when they ran off together, carrying stolen money from investors they had deceived, I didn't panic. I smiled. Because the real game? That was mine, and I was already winning. Mrs. Crawford, your mother's condition is critical. We need to operate immediately. The doctor's words echoed through the stark hospital corridor, sharp and cold. My grip tightened on the phone as I called Douglas for the 6th time. When he finally answered, his irritation was unmistakable. "What is it now, Virginia?" "I'm in the middle of an important meeting," he barked, his familiar coldness settling in my chest like a stone. "Mum's being rushed into emergency surgery. I need you here," I said, my voice cracking as the fluorescent lights above flickered. "Sorry, can't make it. Big things happening. Just handle it yourself," he said flatly, then hung up. I'm Virginia Crawford, 47, and that moment in the halls of St. Luke's Hospital in Birmingham was when I finally acknowledged what I had been denying for far too long. My marriage was unsalvageable. As I watched the nurses wheel my mother toward the ICU, a flood of memories swept through me. Sun-drenched afternoons at our Victorian estate, the scent of her roses drifting through open windows, Father's hearty laugh filling the hallways. That house had belonged to our family for 4 generations. When Father passed 3 years ago, Mother and I inherited the estate together. Every creak in the floor, every detail in the ornate moulding held echoes of our family's past. Douglas used to appreciate that, or so I thought. In the early years of our marriage, he would spend weekends helping Mother in her garden, tender and eager. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his heart had turned to stone. I sat alone in the ICU waiting room, the sterile scent of antiseptic thick in the air, when my phone buzzed with a message from Douglas. Secured my future. Just sold the estate. Leaving for Brazil tonight with someone who actually makes me happy. Goodbye. A strange stillness came over me as I read those words. What Douglas didn't know was that I'd been quietly following his every move for months. My private investigator had been thorough. His affair with his young secretary, their overseas plans, the forged signatures. I typed a single word in response. Fascinating. Looking through the glass at my mother's fragile figure, I felt something awaken inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. Douglas thought he was in control, but he was walking straight into a trap of his own making. He hadn't always been like this. When we met at a charity gala 15 years ago, he was charming, driven, and full of promise. As a junior partner at a small law firm, he had seemed genuinely interested in the legacy of my family's estate. I remember how he'd sit for hours with my father, sipping coffee and asking questions about inheritance and preservation. That house, built in 1887 by my great-grandfather, had been our anchor. It wasn't just bricks and wood. It was every Christmas, every celebration, every quiet Sunday. I could still hear my grandmother's voice, sharing stories in the library's velvet chair. Family isn't just blood, Virginia. It's trust. It's protecting what truly matters. Douglas began to change about 5 years ago. He'd stay late at the office, come home distant and short-tempered. After my father's death, he became increasingly controlling, second-guessing every decision I made, pushing for more authority over the estate. Then things began to disappear. An heirloom here, a vase there. He said they were being appraised. 2 months ago, I discovered an email containing documents for a luxury condo in Rio. That's when I hired Juliana, the private investigator. "Your husband's been shopping the estate around," she reported last week. He's forged documents claiming full ownership. The irony? He never realized my grandmother had placed the estate into an irrevocable trust long before he entered our lives. She had seen what could happen when outsiders tried to take what wasn't theirs. Another message from Douglas buzzed. "You'll thank me when you see what I got for that dusty old house. Time to let go." I slipped my phone into my purse, my fingers grazing the smooth leather of my grandmother's diary. Tucked inside were papers, real ownership documents, proof that would unravel everything Douglas had done. The evening dragged on, the waiting room growing colder. The surgery was taking longer than expected, and anxiety gnawed at me. Then Juliana called. Her voice was tight with urgency. "Virginia, check your email. Now." My hands trembled as I opened the files. Dozens of photos. Douglas and Angela laughing at upscale restaurants, browsing jewelry at Tiffany's, cozying up in luxury real estate offices. But worse were the screenshots of financial transactions. "He's been draining your personal accounts for months," Juliana said. "The estate sale is just the last step. He's moved everything to offshore banks." I checked my accounts. My personal balance? $842. Our joint account? Emptied. He hadn't just planned this escape, he'd orchestrated it over years. Another message from Douglas lit up my screen. "Tossed out those useless photo albums. Buyers want the place cleared by next week. No need for all that sentimental crap." My heart sank. Those albums held generations of memories, my mother's most treasured possessions. Then, my phone showed a live feed from the estate's security cameras. Douglas and Angela, laughing, packing up boxes with champagne in hand, celebrating in our home while my mother lay in critical care. "Virginia," Juliana's voice was firm, "there's more. He's flying out tonight. 2 first-class tickets to Rio, and he's been recording your calls with the hospital. He wanted to be sure your mother wouldn't interfere." It hit me like a tidal wave. He had waited for my mother to be at her weakest. Every move had been calculated, every lie perfectly timed. Just then, the doctor appeared. "Mrs. Crawford, your mother pulled through. The operation was a success, but her recovery will take time." I nodded, gripping my grandmother's diary like a lifeline. Inside were the keys to everything Douglas thought he'd taken. He believed he'd won, but he had no idea what was coming. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't about winning. It's about letting your enemy destroy themselves on their own terms. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Virginia Crawford. I understand you're the buyer Douglas arranged for our estate." My voice remained calm, though anger simmered beneath the surface. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Crawford. Your husband mentioned you would be calling to finalize everything. I must say, $3.2 million is quite a deal for such a beautiful property," he replied with self-assurance. "And you've already transferred the funds?" I glanced at my mother, peacefully sleeping, her frailty a stark contrast to the fury building inside me. "Yes, just this morning," Mr. Reynolds continued. "Your husband insisted on immediate payment. Said something about a can't-miss investment opportunity in Brazil." I smiled grimly. "Mr. Reynolds, I suggest you contact your bank immediately and stop that transfer. You see, Douglas doesn't actually have the authority to sell the estate." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "The property is in an irrevocable trust," I explained. "Any sale without the proper documentation from the trust administrator is fraudulent." I could hear him inhale sharply. "That would make you an unwitting participant in real estate fraud," I added. While Mr. Reynolds tried to process this, I received another text from Douglas. "Just dropped off the final paperwork with the buyers. You should be grateful I secured such a great deal. Heading to the airport now with my real future." I refocused on Mr. Reynolds, now flustered and scrambling. "Check your purchase agreement carefully. I'm sure you'll find some irregularities. My husband has a knack for creative paperwork when it benefits him." At that moment, Juliana slipped into the room, confirming everything was in place. She handed me a folder containing copies of the trust documents and bank statements that showed Douglas's systematic theft. Mr. Reynolds, his voice was now tinged with panic, I've reviewed the documents. These signatures, they don't match the county records. No, they wouldn't, I replied calmly. I suggest you contact your lawyer immediately. The FBI is already involved and they'll want to speak with you about your role in this transaction. Just as I finished speaking, my phone buzzed with a call from Agent Sarah Martinez, who had been building a case against Douglas for months. We're in position at the airport, she said. Your husband just checked in for his flight to Rio with a woman matching Angela's description. Perfect timing, I muttered, watching Juliana set up her laptop to monitor the security feeds. He has no idea the trust administrator is waiting at the gate. Douglas's next text appeared. Boarding soon. You'll never find us. Enjoy your empty life in that worthless old house. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I opened my grandmother's diary and pulled out the document that would destroy Douglas's plans, the original trust agreement detailing the provisions about property transfer and fraud prevention. Juliana looked up from her laptop, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Airport security just flagged their passports. Want to watch the show? On the laptop screen, Douglas and Angela approached the international terminal, confidently pulling expensive matching luggage. I noticed Angela wearing my mother's sapphire necklace, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Mrs. Crawford, Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the phone. We've discovered something disturbing. Your husband didn't just forge documents for the estate sale. He's been running a complex scheme involving multiple properties and elderly victims. I gripped the hospital bed rail as she continued. We've identified at least 6 other families he targeted during medical emergencies. He would forge power of attorney documents while the families were hospitalized. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those late nights at the office, the mysterious meetings. He had been perfecting his scam for years. The other families, the homes, the lives he'd tried to destroy. Juliana spoke again, her eyes glued to her screen. There's more. I've traced the money trail. Angela isn't just his mistress. She's been his accomplice from the start. She works for a shell company laundering money from these scams. On the security feed, I watched as Douglas and Angela approached the gate. He was wearing the custom-made suit I had given him for our anniversary last year. Likely the last gift I would ever give him. Angela clung to his arm, giggling at something he'd said. Then it all happened at once. 2 FBI agents in suits approached from one direction. The trust administrator, Mr. Harrison, emerged from another, flanked by airport security. Douglas's face twisted from confusion to shock to rage in mere seconds. You don't understand, he shouted, his voice clear through Juliana's audio feed. My wife gave me permission to sell the property. I have documentation. Forgery, Mr. Harrison interrupted. The Crawford estate has been in an irrevocable trust for over 20 years. Even if your wife wanted to, she couldn't authorize its sale. I watched Douglas's face drain of color as the truth sank in. Instead of surrendering, he shoved Angela toward the agents and bolted. He made it about 10 steps before security tackled him, sending my mother's antique bracelet skittering across the airport floor. I hadn't even realized it was missing. Virginia, Juliana's voice was urgent. Douglas just tried to transfer another $500,000 from your mother's account. If I hadn't frozen it yesterday... My phone buzzed with one final text from Douglas. You think you're so clever. Check your mother's medical insurance. Oops. I immediately called the hospital billing department. Sure enough, Douglas had cancelled my mother's insurance last week, claiming it was a cost-cutting measure. The surgery she had just undergone would cost thousands of dollars. He had planned it all, get my mother hospitalized without insurance, drain our accounts, sell the estate, and disappear with the money while I drowned in medical debt. What he hadn't counted on was that I had already transferred my mother to my own insurance policy 3 months ago. Sometimes the best trap is the one your enemy never sees coming. As I watched Douglas being handcuffed on Juliana's laptop screen, Agent Martinez hurried into my mother's hospital room, her expression tense. "Mrs. Crawford, we need to act fast. Your husband's phone records show he contacted a demolition company yesterday. They're scheduled to start work on the estate tomorrow morning. Something about the buyer wanting to clear the land immediately." My heart skipped a beat. The estate wasn't just home to our family memories, it held evidence of Douglas's other crimes. I had discovered a hidden safe in his study last week, but hadn't managed to crack it open yet. He was trying to destroy the evidence. "He's trying to erase everything," Juliana said, already dialing her phone. "And I bet that safe contains documents about his other victims." There was more. "Angela's disappeared," Agent Martinez added. "She slipped away during the confusion of Douglas's arrest. She has access to all your banking information." I reached into my grandmother's diary and retrieved a small key hidden in the spine. "My grandmother didn't just set up the trust," I explained calmly. "She installed a state-of-the-art security system throughout the estate. Every room is monitored. Every document is protected. Angela won't be able to access anything without triggering silent alarms." Just then, Juliana's laptop pinged with an alert. The estate's security cameras showed Angela climbing through a window into Douglas's study. She was heading straight for the safe. "Should we send officers?" Agent Martinez asked, already reaching for her radio. "Wait," I said, my eyes fixed on Angela as she began to input the safe's combination. My grandmother had thought of everything. There was a failsafe in place. Any unauthorized access to the safe would trigger an automatic lockdown. On screen, Angela swung open the safe door, her expression smug, only for both the safe and study door to immediately lock, trapping her inside. A fine mist sprayed from hidden vents, harmless but containing an invisible UV dye that would mark anyone in the room for weeks. "The police can take their time," I smiled. "She's not going anywhere, and now she's marked with evidence of attempted theft." My phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds, the would-be buyer. "Mrs. Crawford, I've just learned that Douglas planned to demolish the estate and build luxury condos. He showed me forged environmental surveys claiming the house was structurally unsound. I've already contacted my bank to stop all payments." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, but you should know that the demolition company he hired is another shell corporation. They would have taken your money and vanished." Agent Martinez ended the call and turned to me. "The FBI just found Douglas's laptop. It contains detailed files on wealthy families with elderly or ill relatives across 3 states. He was planning to expand his scheme." I looked at my mother, still resting peacefully, then back at the security feed showing Angela frantically pounding on the study door. My grandmother always said that greed destroys itself. I don't think Douglas ever understood that the true value of our estate wasn't in its price tag. It was in the protections she had built into every brick. Juliana's laptop pinged again. "Virginia," she said urgently, "you need to see this. Douglas had one more plan in motion and it's already started." Juliana turned her laptop so I could see what looked like transfer confirmations. "Douglas set up automatic withdrawals from your mother's retirement accounts. They're scheduled to trigger at midnight. He's trying to empty everything before the banks freeze his assets." I smiled, remembering the day I visited my grandmother's old friend at the trust company 3 months ago. "Let him try," I said, pulling up my banking app on my phone. "I've already moved everything into new accounts protected by the trust. He's about to transfer money from empty accounts, and in doing so, he'll implicate himself in even more fraud." We watched the security feed as police officers entered the study where Angela was still trapped. She was desperately trying to destroy documents from the safe, but now her hands were glowing bright purple under the UV lights. "Mrs. Crawford," Agent Martinez said, reviewing the documents we had found, "this evidence isn't just about your estate. Douglas's files detail a scheme targeting dozens of families. We're looking at multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy." My mother stirred in her bed, her eyes fluttering open. I squeezed her hand gently. Everything's okay, Mom. The estate is safe. Grandma's plan worked perfectly. Of course it did, she whispered, a faint smile on her lips. Your grandmother always said the best trap is the one they walk into themselves. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed. They found Douglas's go bag in his car trunk, she reported. It contained passports, currency, and your grandmother's original will. He thought he had the only copy. I opened my grandmother's diary one last time, retrieving the real original will, safely preserved all these years. No, I said, he only had what we wanted him to find. 2 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse, watching as Douglas and Angela were arraigned. Gone were their designer clothes and smug smiles. In their place, prison jumpsuits and defeated expressions. The prosecutor began reading the 37 charges against them: fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. Your Honour, Douglas's lawyer began, my client was simply trying to protect his wife's assets. That's not what the evidence shows, the prosecutor interrupted, holding up a thick folder. We have documented proof of Mr. Crawford targeting multiple families during medical emergencies, attempting to steal their properties through elaborate fraud schemes. The UV-marked documents recovered from his safe detail every crime. I thought of the other victims, the 12 families who had almost lost everything to Douglas's schemes. Thanks to the evidence we had gathered, they would all get justice. The judge set bail at $5 million each, remanding both Douglas and Angela to custody. When they couldn't pay, they were led away. As they passed, Douglas turned to glare at me. I simply smiled, patting my grandmother's diary. He never understood that real wealth isn't about money. It's about family, legacy, and protecting what truly matters. Back at the estate, my mother was recovering well in her old room, surrounded by family photos and heirlooms we had protected. The garden she loved was blooming again, and the house felt more alive than ever. I sat in my grandmother's favourite chair in the library, feeling her wisdom surround me. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the fight, it's in preserving what truly matters while letting greed destroy itself.